Right, actually, let me introduce you to Helen Jelfs, who's based at University of Bristol, Graduate School of Education. She will tell you in a minute about what her OLnet fellowship is about. Anna DeLido, some of you already know, a research fellow working with me on Cohere as part of the OLnet project and the idea of bringing together collective intelligence around open education. So Helen, why don't you just tell people who you are, why you're here, and how we're going to do the next hour.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here working with you on this project, and it's exciting to present what is a work in progress. It's not finished by any means, and we're learning as we go along. I was invited back in the autumn to join in on this. I didn't know quite what I was taking on at the time, but I was told it was something around mapping the deeper learning literature and doing something with this tool called Cohere at the same time. So it's essentially like a two-stranded piece of work around the use of the tool by someone who is not particularly IT sort of techie. I survive, in my academic environment with the IT skills I have, but Anna and Simon seem to be very interested in how I engage with this tool. So that's interesting, but my main interest is in this area of deeper learning, and I'll be explaining a bit more about what I've been discovering about that as well. So Simon's going to begin by just walking you through the tool, because I understand some of you may not know too much about that. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I've been doing and my experience of using it. And then Anna's going to just come in at the end to pull it together and say a bit about where we've got to and where we're going to go next. Okay?
Right, thanks very much. So, put this on. Okay, so I'm going to give you a lightning introduction to what Cohere is, because we're not going to assume that knowledge, and so then you'll know kind of what Helen's talking about when she starts to show some of the examples of what she's been doing with it. Okay, so Cohere is a collaborative space for working with ideas. That might be one way of summarizing it. Now, many of you will be familiar with collaborative spaces where you can create a group. So we've created a group here called MDLL for Mapping Deeper Literature. And as you'd expect, a group has got members in it. So you create an ID, and that gives you a space to work in. You could keep everything you do private, or you can share it with the world. There's a tag cloud associated with this particular group. These are the tags that have been used, obviously emerging from the analysis of the literature. And we've been obviously working with many websites, and so you find here listings of websites. Now, so far, that's no different from many social media platforms that allow a group to work together and share resources. You may have spotted as I scroll down here, some of the websites have got clips, which are lifted extracts from the site. And if I click on one of these by random, it'll go there hopefully. Okay, so here we are annotating a particular journal paper. If I open up the Firefox sidebar, what that would show, I don't think you annotated this abstract, did you? But if you
no, it was the whole page.
Yeah, if we had Helen had worked on the full text PDF. And we're hopefully going to add annotation of PDFs into this. Let me find another example.
I don't think you'll find any in that first section. You may need to
of course, because you're working on that. Okay, so here's another clip. So if I visit the site. Okay, and in the Cohere sidebar, it shows whether Helen or anybody else, for that matter, has added public annotations. So good thinking dispositions is a fragment of text that she's highlighted here. You can see Cohere has embedded a little icon in there to show that there's an annotation on there. Okay. So what we've got in Cohere then are not only websites, people, and tags, but the idea of ideas. We want to work with ideas, and these ideas, I'll just shut that sidebar down again, are listed out here. And these, if we look at a given idea, it's being created by a person. If I expand the details, you can see whether it's been annotated onto a particular site, whether it's been shared in a particular group, what tags there are on it, and a bit of metadata, plus a description that Helen has provided for her own purposes. Okay. And one of the interesting things about an idea is that it's more than just, hopefully you get this idea that an idea is separate from a clip. So there might be an idea like constructivist approaches to mathematics education, but there might be many clips from many sources that are attached to that bigger idea. So that idea in and of itself exists, in the literature. It's not grounded in any one particular source. And that's what you see in the sidebar when you're browsing. So let me show you how we create these annotations. So I'm going to, let's imagine I'm doing a piece of research, and I'm working on a question. What do large learning technology research groups focus on? Okay, that's my research question. It's not actually grounded in any piece of literature. It's just an idea, but it's a first-class object, which is going to have a URL. I could embed it in other websites. I could tweet it. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and there's my question. Right now, I could tweet that out. I could get the snippet code for it. I could connect it to other ideas. We'll show you that in a minute. Okay. We also got voting up and down, so somebody could vote that up and down, and I could bookmark it. So now I'm going to go to IET, and this looks relevant. It tells me what kinds of projects they do. So I can highlight the text of interest and create a new idea, and I'll just give it a summary, IET's focus areas, okay? And you can see it's lifted the clip and put it in there. And so in the sidebar, we have IET's focus areas. And if I click on that, it highlights it, and you can see it's inserted a little icon in there. Then we'll go to TechRe, since we've got George Siemens here, and TechRe are doing something on mobile and ubiquitous computing. So I'll create an idea against the selected text here. Okay, and this is TechRe's focus. Okay. So I've now got two ideas as I trawl my literature or do my intelligence analysis, whatever it is I'm doing. But I can connect this now, because this is one possible answer to my research question. This has a relevant relationship to my research question. So, I can choose from a whole bunch of relationships. We've got quite a rich set here because we've been developing a language. But I might simply say that, this responds to this question I'm working on. And in the sidebar, you can now see that this annotation in pink on this website responds to this question here. If I go back to IET's page, there are no connections around this yet, but there's my idea. And I could connect that also to my research question I'm working on. Okay, so this is another response to it. Okay. So now I've got two ideas in the literature connected to my basic research question, and if I click on the connection button on that research question, I start to see the emerging picture of how I'm weaving a web of meaningful connections around the web. And of course, if I click on the details of any of these, it shows me the clip I was on, I can visit the site, etc. Okay. So when we go back to the home page for our Mapping Deeper Literature group, on the Connections tab, what we have then are the many, many connections that Helen has been making as she annotates the literature. and we'll talk a bit about what that experience was like. And while that just shows a list of triples, we can generate a bigger network view, and we'll come to these maps a bit later on. It's focused in on this concept of learner autonomy, and it's showing around there what's connected, and I can start to filter this in interesting ways, which we'll talk about later on. Okay, so that's a lightning tour of Cohere for you, and that gives you a sense of what you're going to be looking at now as Helen takes you through her experience. So I'll hand over to Helen at that point. Pass the mic. Okay.
Okay. Is that okay? Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. All right. Well, just get down here. Okay, so our starting point was the Hewlett Foundation's commitment to this notion of deeper learning. They've obviously identified that as an important area that they want to focus on, obviously in the States, but I think it's relevant across the world too. And they have identified these 5 core elements that they suggest are important for deeper learning. So those were, in a sense, the sort of search terms that I used to start with, and I added others into that as I started reading around the literature. So, for example, assessment isn't there, but yet it's something that they particularly flag up, you know, the sort of kind of assessment practices that have dominated in the last sort of 20 years really don't suit what we're trying to get at here. So what kind of assessment practices are there that might suit better? Obviously there's this whole area of 21st century skills as well. What are those more specifically within that? The other area that I didn't see there was professional development, so I added that in as well, because I think that's going to be a really important area. New technologies, I thought that there's probably quite a lot around that area. And then the whole area of research in this field, what is out there. So those were some of the sorts of search terms that I was using. And I also just generated some questions that you know, I had in the back of my mind to sort of steer me a bit as I was looking at various literature. So if you just glance at those, and a few more over here as well. Yeah, that last one there, these terms, you know, inquiry-based learning is frequently used, but then you get project-based and problem-based, and you know exactly how are these different? Are they different? Is there a difference in degree or whatever? So that's a big whole area that I haven't quite got a handle on just yet, but it's recognising it as being very important there. Okay, so I began searching out there for literature, seeing what was coming up when I put in those search terms, and I came up with a whole variety of resources. in a sense, I was quite open-minded. I'm not an expert in open educational resources, so I was sort of thinking, well, open educational, let's leave it quite open and see what's out there. Interestingly, I did that first rather than sort of going to the literature, going straight to the journals, and it was only a bit later on that Simon said something, and I thought, oh, I better go and mine the literature, the journal stuff a bit more as well. So there's a mixture of stuff out there. There's quite a few sites that various universities have established to disseminate their work in this area. So in a sense, it's quite open. And then I annotated them as Simon's just demonstrated. But when you're first coming to that screen, well, in fact, I came for one day back in December, and Anna sort of gave me a whistle-stop tour of the tool. And then I went home and I sort of thought, what did she say about how I did this? And I can't remember what this was for and how do I do that. Fortunately, then I found some, Michelle had done some little talks out on the YouTubes, and I sort of was looking at that because I'd forgotten what to do, and I guess I hesitate sometimes at pressing too many sort of bits and pieces in case something goes wrong, So I had to sort of start from the bottom and sort of build up gradually, and there's quite a lot going on when you're trying to annotate something. You're sort of looking at the relevance of the material that you've got in front. You're trying to write a little summary, a sentence that somehow captures what this is about. You're invited to write a further description, so somehow you have to engage with it and pull out, tease out some of the core message within it. Then I was trying to work with the idea types. So Simon didn't say too much about that, but you may have noticed that in one there was a question mark, and then there was another sort of picture icon. And to begin with, I quite liked, because those weren't in there initially. I think there's only, it just said idea, I think. And I quite like the idea of setting up new ones and, finding bits of clip art that somehow expressed, a little appropriate icon. And so I quite like playing with that, and setting up all these sort of different kinds of ideas. So some of them around strategies, some of them around principles, things like wanted, what we need to move things on. And I was quite good early on at using those kinds of idea types, but as the weeks went on, I got a bit fed up with that because I needed to. It was demanding more of me than I think I was prepared to give at that point. So you can see the list there. But that's one thing I want to go back in. Maybe I think there's lots of others from other people in there as well, that one. But I think that's important, and I want to go back in. And maybe I tried to create too many categories, but I was thinking that those would be important to be able to sort of sort it all out a bit, and that but we're still sort of thinking that through. That was like a report. That icon there was, it was a report that had been published. So I was trying to sort of do some kind of classification, I suppose, of kinds of resources that were there. It was interesting yesterday. Actually, perhaps I'll just come back to this first. So when Simon then said, take a look in the visualizer, because well, I'll say what I was going to say actually. In one of the leaflets for Cohere, it has like 3 words: annotate, connect, and explore. And interestingly, I looked at that as 3 kind of distinct phases of the piece of work that I was doing. So when I sort of submitted my plan, and worked out my time scale, I was sort of thinking, right, I'm going to annotate in this period of time, then I'm going to connect, and then I'm going to explore it. And Simon then sort of said, well, maybe you need to begin connecting a bit now and looking at what's there. So when we first looked in there, we came up with all these sort of isolated bits and pieces here. Nothing joins up, but they're all sort of discrete connections there, just between isolated ideas. And so I had a sort of concerted effort to think about the connections that there were, and over time, I got things linked in, but then it becomes, almost incomprehensible, and I'm sort of thinking, help, where do I go with this now? This is just a mass of information there, and I don't really know what to do with it next. But I was interested, because I didn't know why the one in the middle there was coming up yellow. It's not yellow in that slide, but that's the learner autonomy one. But it seemed obvious to me that there were lots of connections here. It seemed to be, I used the word a nexus point, because that was a term that I'd come across, but I gather you in the IT world call them nodes and things like that. That seemed very important, and I had sensed that from the literature I was reading. It was a term that does need unpacking quite considerably, but nevertheless seems to bring to the center the person who is learning, and enabling them to take on their learning for themselves, supporting them to do that across time in different ways. Then yesterday, Simon and Anna introduced me to this little sliding bar at the top there, where it's a depth bar to 1, which shows 1 layer out from that central idea. So that's a way of sort of beginning to isolate some of the connections, to look at that and to focus onto it in a clearer way, without all the other lines and so on. So that's been just interesting, learning that, and I can take that away with me and use it to sort of mine other aspects of there, and of the map there, and begin to make more sense of different aspects of it. The next few slides just illustrate these kind of nexus points. I just sort of looked at it, scanned around it, and sort of think, where is my eye drawn to? What's going on here? And so those are represented in these next few slides here. So this seems to be important again, this notion of self-direction and being able to manage self, not just manage learning, but manage self. So there's a lot more depth to that. You know, there's a lot more around emotion and some of the work that we've been doing in other arenas. It relates to person's story and their narration of their own personhood. You know, so I imagine that kind of notion taps into that as well. It's something around the personhood of the learner, as much as you know, just skills and thinking and skills and so on. I think that there's a lot more subtlety to it. In fact, that was in a sense where I came to this notion of deeper learning. In my doctoral work, you know, it wasn't so much the thinking skills and all those kind, you know, the 21st century kind of skills, the techie skills. It was a bit more from this place of interiority, I suppose. And actually, when I was elaborating the list of search terms, because the fifth Hewlett element was learning how to monitor and direct one's own learning, I developed some subdivisions of that, things like deep and surface learning, learning how to learn, but there were other things in there like personal mastery, resilience, mindfulness and soul, and I doubt whether you know, those are things that are to the fore, but I think that increasingly those elements are going to be essential components as much as you know, the thinking skills and the cognitive side of things. Now that may be disputed, but that's just a sense that I have. So I'll just go on through here. Yeah, again, it's bringing out this, you know, the internal dialogue. There's a whole lot of different things going on in the learning encounter and experience, and having some kind of shared language for doing that seems to be really important. So different kinds of skills. So this whole notion of learning how to learn and learning power is one term that has been used to capture this notion of the capacity, the capabilities, the dispositions towards effective and lifelong learning. And this piece of work here by the Teaching and Learning Research Programme has done a lot of work around pedagogy and assessment for learning. Interestingly, I mean, if any of you are involved in you know, the school educational environment, you'll know that assessment for learning has been a really big issue. But more often than not, it's focused on, you know, improving the SAT scores and that kind of thing, rather than this sort of more whole person, you know, the learning of the person. And so that's quite an interesting idea, and there's some interesting work there as well. Interestingly, this was another big area that seems to keep coming up not just being an isolated learner, but the real value of being within a social grouping and cooperating and collaborating. And I think I was surprised at how strongly that theme seems to come through in much of the literature that I've been sort of looking at as well. And as that sort of quote there says, which I probably should say where that comes from, but this challenges the role of the teacher. Where does the teacher now perceive themselves to be in a different kind of learning context? And that's why the inclusion of professional learning, I think, is key as well, because it sort of challenges how we understand knowledge, how we create knowledge, how we generate knowledge together, and who owns the power and the knowledge as well, and where it's sort of located. Again, another big area seems to be around this notion of meaningful learning. It somehow has to connect with the learner, and I guess that relates to what I was saying earlier about personhood and narrative, and social setting, context, identity. There's a whole lot of really rich stuff going on behind these ideas. I've mentioned the commonly held language, the idea that that there's a shared way of talking about it, and also the idea that this becomes a key focus sort of strategically for school communities, to, in a sense, it becomes like their moral intent and purpose. Talked a little bit about engaging teachers in learning, and there was some work, interestingly, around the disconnect between research and teachers, and how effectively research findings were communicated with teachers and taken up by teachers. So that raises a whole issue about what kind of research we do and how we do it as well. Yeah, that's like the moral intent, in a sense, that schools are engaged in what's called authentic intellectual work. But I think, as I've already said, it's more than just intellectual in the sense of the cognitive. There are affective dimensions to it as well. And again, what kind of a pedagogical interaction really is going to support this. And it's certainly going to be around this transformative relationship, rather than the transmission kind of thing. And I just was interested in that notion of continual becoming, because again it sort of taps into an area of my interest, in a sense that there's something more for the teacher. It's not just, or perhaps it shouldn't just be a job that's contained, but it actually is about their personhood and their work and so on, as much as anything. So where next? Well, there's some more work to do around literature. I think I've probably sort of scoped what, obviously there's a constraint on time now, And so I think I've identified the literature that I still just want to annotate, beginning to look into those questions and try to think about the answers. And then thinking about how best to, I want to tidy up certain things I've already said about the idea types. One interesting thing just to mention was that yesterday Simon and Anna pulled up the stats pages for the tagging and the ideas and things that I'd used, and it was interesting to see that most of those sort of themes, key areas that I'd identified were coming up sort of in the top 10 of the tags, and being a bit thick with this IT stuff, although I could realised that tagging, the different size and the weighting of the tags said something about what was going on with those ideas. I hadn't made the connection between the size of those tags and what they were telling me. So 21st century skills is coming up big, if we go back into there at any point, as are some of the others, but I hadn't made that connection. But it was interesting to see that coming at it more intuitively, like I'd done, that I'd actually, it sort of confirmed what was there numerically, as it were. So that was an interesting thing from yesterday. So I think I probably said quite enough for now. And Anna's going to just say a little bit more about where we go from here.
So what we have been trying to do is trying to understand how we could use Cohere actually as a qualitative data analysis tool, and we are trying to understand if it can actually support the process, the sense-making process that the analysts go through in his qualitative data analysis. So we have seen as Cohere can support some of the basic features of qualitative data analysis, like, for example, coding. First of all, gathering data collection. So what if the data that you are analyzing all are on the web? So we have seen as Helen could go around and through the sidebar she could collect all the different websites of papers she wanted to read, and she could annotate, take notes. So also note taking on the different things she was reading, either an abstract or the full paper if available. And then the third feature is coding. So Cohere supports different type of coding. So the first one is by supporting the tagging of both the clip of text that highlights when you read your papers online and also your notes. And to do that, you can actually just tag clip of text and notes. She has done it, but I just want to show you how you can do that. So suppose this is the Helen workspace, and these are all the 199 notes she has been collecting. So if she wants this, both at the initial stage or in the following stage of analysis and sense making, she wants to further aggregate or cluster their codes or create new codes that are higher level classification that she's trying to, she comes out with. So suppose this, for example, she wants to, she thinks that these three annotation or these three nodes are related with learning power. So she can just select them and then click on tag my ideas or annotation, and then, for example, write learning power. And as soon as she starts typing, all her codes come up. So, for example, learning power already existed, so I can, I can select it and then click on go. If I click on go, these codes are going to be added to the other nodes, or I can create new ones. So, for example, if these were related to learning skills, I can create a new tag and a new code. And this would appear in this tag cloud on the left, which somehow give me in context always the feedback of how my codes are evolving. So, and the sides give me an idea of the emerging codes. So this is one of the first things that this is the way in which Cohere supports this kind of coding and supports also reorganization and reflection. Another important task in this process is sorting data, because of course sorting is another important task in qualitative data analysis, and supports the way in which then the analyst can try to make interpretation and reflection on the data that is analyzing. And so Cohere has a clear approach to sorting by using visualization of the nodes and codes as a network graph. So if you click on the connection tab and you click on the graph visualization, this gives you an idea of actually a visual feedback of what is the emerging structure of all the nodes that Helen has been taking, and all the connections she made between those nodes. And of course, as Helen was saying, this, as soon as the process of analysis goes on, this can be overwhelming. So there are different ways in which Cohere visually supports the analyst in the reflection of on his data, on the data that he's collecting and analyzing. So for example, the first things you can do is focusing on specific nodes or concept. For example, learning autonomy is in yellow because it's simply the most central concept. And this is already some feedback that the visualization gives you. And then you can, by choosing the depth, you can choose, for example, to visualize just the one level connections. Oops, this didn't really work. It's supposed to give me the one level. The one level connections, and you can scroll here and see, for example, okay, what is directly related to learning autonomy. So you can see, for example, all the theory that assume this concept, all the evidence that exemplify this concept, and so on. And then you can even start discovering cross connections between your nodes. And when you feel ready, you can decide, for example, to go to depth 2, and you can see how your network of nodes grows. So another way, if this is still overwhelming, Cohere also support you to explore by using this feature called network search by depth, how the nodes you have been focusing on actually relates to the main higher level categories that you have been identifying. This is another thing that we haven't previously mentioned. So the way in which you can categorize are two. So the first one is coding by simple tagging, and then you can identify higher level categories by associating icons and images to the nodes itself. So Helen identifies different type of higher level categories that you can read here. So for example, inquiry, evidence, practices, principles. So what if I want to know if there is, for example, any theory or any evidence related to this concept? I don't want to see all the rest. I just want to now reflect on theories on learner autonomy. So I can go here, I click on theory, I select it, I run the search, and then it's going to filtering me out all the rest, and it's going to give me just the theory related to learner autonomy. So here you can see is related to the theory on thinking about learning metacognition, because actually this theory assumes this concept on learning autonomy and so on. So somehow you can be, Cohere supports you in your further interpretation of your data analysis through this concept and through this visualization metaphor that goes through network visualization and different network searches. So that's just what I wanted to tell you about how Cohere can support like the next stages that Helen will be going through. That is, now that she has collected all the data and she's trying to make sense of it, trying to give answer to the research question that she had at the beginning, how actually Cohere is going to support her process. So this is going to be the next step that Helen will be going through, and together we are interested in understanding how good this metaphor works. So is the visualization really working? Do you need, for example, to see clusters network closer because you need visually to see them, to connect them, as Helen suggested yesterday? Or, for example, do you need new forms of software coding that come out in the second phase of your sense-making process? So the next steps for us is trying to understand how good or bad the technology supports Helen, just not in the phase of data collections, note-taking, and initial coding, but also in the following phase of sorting, sense-making, and driving, and how this effectively can drive her to give answer to the research question that she had at the beginning of the literature review. So this is what we will be doing next.